Ah yes, the dreaded video game adaptation. These are pretty maligned and for good reason. Now being the worst adaptation is no small feat, and you're probably thinking I'm crazy, that this is my pick for the worst one. I can't blame you, the competition is pretty stiff. In fact, it's still a crapshoot whether or not a film or show adaptation of a game is going to be good or complete garbage. Despite knowing this, the Max Payne movie angers me to no end. This is a good time to talk about stories in video games. The fact is, they're typically pretty simple, at least on paper. You see, most of the time you're invested in a game's story because you as the player are interacting with it. I'm not invested in Half-Life because it's the greatest sci-fi story ever told. I'm interested because I'm Gordon Freeman. I'm exploring Black Mesa. I'm dealing with aliens in the military. I'm invested because I'm in the middle of the story. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad story, far from it. But the fact of the matter is, the medium does a lot of the heavy lifting. It's easier to care about what's going on when you're an active participant. Film, on the other hand, is passive. It has to try harder to make you care about what's going on. You can't just show an interesting scenario completely devoid of plot. You need to make it somewhat grounded. We need to like the characters, and plot contrivances suck us out of the movie. Meanwhile, in video games... What's that? There was some kind of plot hole? I can't think about that right now. 14 people are trying to shoot me to death. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible to make a good movie or TV show out of something light on story. You can adapt anything well if you're creative enough. However, you need to be pretty damn creative to make something like Portal work, for example. A lot of games don't have an easy answer to the question, how would you make a movie of this? This is exactly why Max Payne is so frustrating. Not only is it an amazingly fun game, but it also has a genuinely compelling narrative. Not just by video game standards, it's just flat out good. Not to mention it's heavily influenced by film. You can just go back and look at what inspired Max Payne, and you already have a basis as to what this movie should be. So you're essentially handed this adaptation on a silver platter. So what do? Well, obviously you get the guy who directed A Good Day to Die Hard and a writer whose only 2 credits besides Max Payne is something called Cure, which I can't even find any evidence of its existence, and the other is for a tech position. You know what? Forget it. It doesn't even matter if he had written next to nothing before this, because the work was already done. This is like if you had to do a homework assignment, but all the questions were already correctly filled in. The only thing you had to do was sign your name and turn it in. Instead of doing that though, you crumpled it up, threw it away, and then winged the assignment yourself, ultimately ending up with a D for dickhead. More importantly though, it's a D because it's kind of like Max Payne. It's obvious they knew what Max Payne was, but they only kind of knew. Like they were drunk at a house party and one of their friends was playing it in the corner. However, it being kind of close just makes it worse. I prefer some crazy off-the-wall departure. That can at the very least be funny and entertaining in its own right. They're only gonna kind of do it right. They should have just said fuck it and did something that's completely unlike Max Payne. Like just spitballing here, but they could do something insane like having Max go to Brazil to be a bodyguard for some rich socialites, and it's about poverty and police corruption in third world countries. You know, something that would never happen. Fuck you, Rockstar. I guess I should probably talk about the movie now. But would you believe that I don't even need to see one frame of the film to know there is one huge glaring problem just staring me in the face? I'll give you a hint. It's on the poster, and it sells hamburgers. Yes, Marky Mark, the hero of Boston, the assaulter of the Vietnamese, and theoretical savior of 9/11. If only he was on that goddamn plane. He would have soothed the hijackers into a false sense of security with his sick beats, and then he would have gouged out their eyes.
Gouge his eyes!
Still, whatever you think of the dude personally, I think we can all agree he was a terrible choice for Max Payne. He's fine as an everyman character, maybe kind of a shady guy, Or somebody from Boston. Hey, I'm from Boston. He's certainly not good at being an introspective, gravelly voiced noir detective. It's just mass appeal, that's all. Get some recognizable people in there and it's bound to be a hit. That sure worked for him alright. The irony is not lost that there were literally 2 people that looked exactly like Max Payne at the time. But there was also someone who was not only his voice, but eventually became the third face for Max. I do understand that Sam Lake is not an actor and is Finnish, so he doesn't sound anything like Max Payne, but that still leaves us with 2 people who are both professional actors and are both recognizably Max. Hell, James McCaffrey is literally in this movie. As much as it seems to be a no-brainer to cast either of these guys, I really wouldn't have minded if they chose to go with someone else, if they fit the role. Just not Mark fucking Wahlberg. The rest of the main cast is also filled out with recognizable celebrities.
How ludicrous, isn't it?
And look, I'll give credit where credit is due. No one does a particularly bad job. They aren't phoning it in or anything. They showed up and did what was asked of them. It's just so unnecessary. None of these characters needed to have big names attached to them. They were all pretty much bit parts in the first game anyway. Just served to balloon the budget when that money could have been better spent on other aspects of the film. Okay, I've delayed long enough. Let's get into it. Let me start with one simple question though. If you're going to make a Max Payne movie, what would you include in it? If you answered a bunch of cool action scenes with bullet time, congrats! You're far more qualified to have made this movie than anyone involved. For some godforsaken reason, the Max Payne movie has very few action scenes, and only one contains bullet time. In fact, there are so few, they're all in the trailer. And don't tell me it was because of the fucking budget. Hard Boiled is one of the biggest inspirations for Max Payne, the game, and it only cost $4.5 million to make. Well, this goddamn thing cost $35 mil. Oh, also, they're all terrible and incredibly boring.
Laughing at you, me. Anybody coming this way, I see. Stand tall, you so small to me. Told us with my enemy. Watch for the seats. This right here is strategy. Every minute I make it breathe. Now you wanna leave on.
No shoot dodging, hardly any slow-mo, it's baffling. It's honestly kind of amazing how long this movie goes before a proper shootout. There is this scene at the beginning of the movie, which is kind of neat, but it's not much of a fight. And it's certainly not a gunfight. You go an entire hour before any kind of proper shootout, and it takes place at an office building in broad daylight. And Max spends most of it hiding behind some cabinets. The direction the writer decided to go with the movie is focus on the whole detective angle of Max Payne, going around searching for clues, leads, and the like. Except that's not really the focus of the game at all. In fact, it's pretty antithetical to the game.
Collecting evidence had gotten old a few hundred bullets back. I was already so far past the point of no return I couldn't even remember what it looked like when I had passed it.
No one wanted this. They primarily wanted an action movie, with the mystery element in the background as a driving force to the carnage. But no, instead of an undercover cop with his cover blown and framed for murder, we get a disgraced detective who's been demoted to desk jockey, bumbling around trying to find the guy responsible for his wife's murder. This is character assassination of the highest degree. Max Payne has been transformed from the slick-talking, revenge-filled, unstoppable machine into an ineffectual moron. Instead of making the logical conclusion to try and hit V at its source, Max spends all of his time looking for the third guy that got away. Granted, that didn't happen in the original game, still he's spending all of his energy trying to find what he thinks to be one random druggie that just happened to hit his house at random. In New York. He's so dead set on this, he makes literally everyone in the entire precinct, including his former partner Alex, hate his guts. Which is understandable, because I hate him too. You could say, Max is a fucking pain.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the pain in the butt. Pain to the max.
You're killing me.
The dude truly is an unlikable, miserable bastard, whose big plan amounts to trying to find a needle in a haystack. You can argue he's a desperate, broken man or whatever, and he's just grasping at straws, but that's true in the game too. It was unlikely that he'd ever be able to stop the flow of V entirely. Given that, he still had a much clearer plan of attack. To continue to play devil's advocate, there is an argument to be made that it was just a different interpretation of the same thing. First of all, I don't want an interpretation. It was fine as it was, and it set the stage efficiently. Secondly, this writer does not have the chops to make the movie's more depressing angle work. All it does is make Max unlikable, and the plot meander for way too long. And boy does it meander. Since Max isn't following any leads on V production or keeping tabs on the Punchinello crime family, he's left with basically just asking random people if they know anything, paired with getting lucky breaks from other characters. The movie's called Max Payne, you think the dude would have any kind of agency in his own story. Max's family being killed isn't even the inciting incident anymore. It's the death of Mona's sister, Lisa. Oh my bad, they changed her name to Natasha.
Lisa Punchinello. Lisa Punchinello was the Don's wife.
Mona Sachs, Lisa's evil twin.
What, was the Mona Lisa thing too silly for you? In your movie called Max Payne? Anyway, before Natasha was killed, she was with Max because he wanted info about a random crackhead in New York, so he thought he might as well start asking prostitutes about it. But she pisses him off and he kicks her out. Then Jack Lapino hacks her to pieces just cause he likes killing people who use his drug, I guess. Seriously, there isn't a deeper reason. She doesn't stumble upon the conspiracy or anything like that. He just thinks it's fun. Anyway, she just happened to steal Max's wallet and that ropes him in, so it's just a big fucking coincidence that he was involved at all. Alex figures out a connection between Natasha and Max's wife, and then gets killed to keep things quiet. And away we go! Except not really. The rest of the movie basically just amounts to going to a location and asking people questions. Most of which are not initiated by Max. Other people do all the heavy lifting when it comes to tracking down leads and finding people involved. Whether it's Alex, Mona, or just some random guy, Max hardly does anything. Here's a great example. After Mona shows Max where the last guy Natasha talked to was, they get a glimpse of his tattoo before he falls to his death. So they just go to a random tattoo parlor to ask about it. This is a fairly common tattoo, so I guess it stands to reason that it would be a safe bet that just any old parlor would happen to have it as one of their designs. However, the guy running the establishment just so happens to be an expert in Norse mythology. He literally has a book all about it on his desk at all times apparently. Thank goodness this random guy has all the answers, or else our main characters might actually have to do something. This is such lazy ass writing. It's way too convenient and frankly unsatisfying. If this was a pure action flick and this scene was here just to get the plot moving along, then it would at least be more understandable. However, the writer specifically went for the detective angle. So if you're gonna do that, could you at least have the decency to show our main character doing any kind of detective work? What are the odds that a random tattoo artist would know the meaning of any given tattoo beyond a surface level? Let alone literally studying the lore to the point he has a book about it on hand. This doesn't even really answer the question as to why people who do V get these tattoos. The tattoo artist explains these wings are a symbol of protection, but how the hell would a random junkie know that? Does the drug just compel you to get these tattoos? I guess you see these monsters when you do V, so maybe they somehow made the connection that these are Valkyrie? Oh wait, I know the reason why. Natasha had to have the same tattoo as the people who broke into Max's house so Alex could make the connection and subsequently get murdered, propelling Max into the plot, because the writer is a fucking hack. The momentum of the plot aside, this sequence of events practically writes itself. Just have the tattoo artist vaguely know the Norse connection of the tattoo, but then have him note that V junkies seem to get them a lot for some reason. Max would then research the Norse mythology on his own, so he has more to do than, nothing. Ultimately, I don't think any of this really matters though, as Max's brilliant deduction from all this is that the Acer Corporation has a wing in their logo, so they must be connected. Well, kind of. I guess the thing that actually tips him off is that all of his wife's work papers are missing, but if that's the case, it literally has nothing to do with any of the tattoo stuff. Stuff like that honestly makes it hard to talk about this movie coherently. Every plot beat seems utterly contrived, and it doesn't really feel like there's much of a connective tissue between most scenes. That's why I'm utterly baffled at the large swaths of changes the writer made to the story. They cut out so much and don't really replace it with anything. I'd say the worst example of that is the removal of the Punchinello crime family. If you've played the game, you know how important that mob organization is to the overall story. Not only do they distribute V, but they also serve as a great red herring. Max spends all of his time and energy working up the ladder of the mob, only to find out they're merely pawns in Nicole Horn's game. Instead, the entire plot function of Punchinello is given to Jack Lapino for some reason, and it raises a whole lot of questions. I don't understand how Lapino has the means to distribute V on seemingly such a large scale, when his entire racket seems to only consist of a handful of guys in a dirty old warehouse. The movie also never bothers to explain how he knows how to make it in the first place. I understand he was a former test subject of the Valkyrie program, but he was just a soldier and wasn't actually involved in creating it. Did Acer give him the formula and the means to produce it? Well, I don't think that's it, because unlike the game, it doesn't seem like Horn has any interest in keeping the project alive after it was a failure. I guess he must have stolen it then. Still, I don't really see how this nutcase was able to actually work out how to synthesize V, even if he had the formula. Fucking hell, I don't even know why they're allowing this guy to operate or even live. They killed Max's wife just because she stumbled on some documents by mistake. However, they're totally fine letting a violent murder man that hacks people to pieces just for fun live. Not only is there filmed evidence of this guy being a part of your experiment, but he's currently making the drug that you don't want anyone to know about. Acer also knows exactly where he operates because BB shows up later to kill Max. Lapino seems a lot more of a liability than someone seeing some paperwork and not knowing what it is. Anyway, after this part, BB brings Max to the docks and tries to kill him. But he escapes and jumps in the water in one of the most drawn out scenes in the movie. He flounders around in the water for so long, I seriously put it on 1.5 speed because I was just done with this movie wasting my time. However, after this we have a section that is the most similar to the actual game, and that's the assault on the Acer building. This is the best part of the movie by far, but that isn't saying much. While it does have the most action out of any part of the movie, Max still does a lot of standing around, which just drags the pace down. He shoots BB and the movie ends on a cliffhanger of Horn still being around. I don't know why they felt the need to set up their own sequel, as Max Payne already has a sequel, and it's the goddamn greatest shit ever. Like I said before, this plot is so full of holes that it actually makes it difficult to write a coherent script about it, but I wanted to add this part to talk about the other stuff that bothered me.
BB turned out to be another cardboard cutout bad guy.
I mentioned this earlier, but all of the characters in this movie only serve small roles in the actual game. If they wanted to expand the part of Mona Sachs, I could have lived with that. but changing all these characters and giving them bigger roles just serves to muddle the plot and take focus away from our main character. The first game was more or less entirely centered around Max, but we have a few supporting characters to keep things more interesting and leave the door open for a sequel.
Mr. Payne, I would like to introduce you to my colleagues in what we call the Inner Circle.
You've been watching too much X-Files.
While not as omnipresent as some of the other stuff that was removed, it's still nevertheless very important to the story, and it really sells the mystery angle of what's going on. Receiving cryptic phone calls until finally being shown what's going on is a really cool aspect of Max Payne.
Mr. Payne, it's time to show you the benefits of my brew. Be a good boy now.
You'd find that Lady Luck was really a hooker. You were fresh out of cash.
While V is certainly a very important part of the game, I feel like they harp way too much on it in the movie. At the end of the day, it was little more than a plot device, something to guide the story. Dedicating so much time to it is just focusing on the wrong thing, something the writer seems to be an expert at. I also have a bone to pick with the Angels of Death. Not that I think it's necessarily a bad idea, but I'm not sure if the imagery really fits. However, what really bothers me is every time I see those fucking CGI angels on screen, I just know that it was taking out a large chunk of the budget every time they appeared. That money should have gone to action set pieces instead. Please focus on the core of your movie instead of dedicating so much time and money to what is little more than a gimmick.
I was in a computer game. Funny as hell, it was the most horrible thing I could think of.
This might seem like a bizarre complaint, but I really hate it when terrible adaptations display a deeper understanding about the source material. So you knew what the game was about, but instead you chose to make this? There are obvious ones like Gognitti's self-storage. Hey cool, how about actually putting Vinny Gognitti in the fucking movie instead?
You're waving your piece like it meant something? Yeah! Oh my god! Oh god, you shot me! Ah!
The most humorous one of these is the V logo, which you can spot in the background. It's ripped straight out of the game. But they changed how V works. It's not injected by a syringe anymore, it's a substance you drink. So this doesn't even make any sense at all. At this point, I'm sure I've convinced you that this movie is bad. In fact, you probably already knew that. However, it's possible that I haven't convinced you it's the worst. In fact, just by sheer technical ability, it's one of the better video game movies. It actually looks like a movie, there's camera work and set pieces, and it has actors that can act. Still, it's a mess. This movie only had one opportunity to make an impact, and it squandered it. And it would have been so easy to adapt. Identifying the parts that are completely necessary for the story and stuff that's there just for gameplay purposes is extremely easy if you think about it for about 5 minutes. Locations like the harbor or the parking garage aren't needed. Superfluous mini-bosses like Frankie the Bat Niagara,
As in you cry a lot?
could be completely cut out with no ramifications whatsoever. Then all you really need to do is shorten what you have left for the action set pieces, keep most of the expository aspects from the graphic novel segments, and maybe shuffle some of the remaining characters around, and bam, you have your movie right there. I replayed Max Payne for this video, not only to get footage, but to get a refresher. It had been a while since I last played it, and I wanted to compare and contrast it with the movie. I don't need to tell you this, but Max Payne is such a good game. It's truly something special, especially these graphic novel parts. It's crazy how these still images of friends, family, coworkers, and just random people off the street are far more vibrant and entertaining than any of the quote-unquote professional actors in this movie. Some might ask, if the game is so good, is a film adaptation even necessary? Well, no adaptation is necessary. But I think a movie or show of Max Payne or any game in general, to be honest, is at the very least warranted. You see, games lack a certain fluidity. When you're playing a game, you have to be able to react to things in a fair manner. You can't just completely blindside the player with action, they need to be able to react to it. QuickTime events kind of bridge the gap, but not really because they aren't actually gameplay. There's a really good example of this in Max Payne. When you meet the Finito brothers, they pull out their guns in the cutscene. However, when you exit out of the cutscene, they aren't instantly shooting you. It would be unfair, you'd call bullshit. So instead there's this kind of awkward transition cutscene where Max jumps out of the way and then you're in gameplay. There are many examples of stuff like this in Max Payne or any game for that matter. Now this isn't a problem whatsoever. In fact, it's good game design. These are just the limitations you have to deal with when making a video game. With a movie, on the other hand, you aren't bound by such things. There would be no need to do any of this and the action could flow uninterrupted. That, in my opinion, is why video games are worth adapting into film. They have to actually be good though, and that leads us back to the Max Payne movie. This circumstance is most likely the only opportunity this franchise ever had or will ever have to get a film adaptation. And what we got is just a boring piece of trash. Sure, other video game movies are bad, but this represents one of the greatest missed opportunities in the history of video games and film. Boy, I sure do hope someone got fired for that blunder.
Woden grinned smugly. It was the grin of a winner. That made two of us.